I want you to picture a very specific type of person for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Picture someone in the top 1% of global intelligence. I mean, I'm talking about a brilliant software engineer or, a cutting-edge hardware designer in Silicon Valley.
Right, the absolute top tier.
Exactly. These are people whose brains are literally wired to invent the future. They have the capability, the resources, the raw intellectual horsepower to build things that could fundamentally change how we live.
Yeah.
But keeping that image in your head, I want you to confront this deeply uncomfortable statistic. Why do upwards of 90% of these generational talents choose to spend their entire lives just, safely tucked away in the cubicles of massive tech monopolies?
It's a huge paradox, honestly.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like, why do people with virtually limitless potential voluntarily lock themselves into these incredibly safe, predictable, and ultimately mediocre routines? They never once step out to build their own vision.
Well, I mean, it's the ultimate trap of modern achievement, right? We are so culturally conditioned to assume that extreme intelligence naturally translates into extreme boldness or, fierce independence.
But it doesn't.
No, what we see in reality is the exact opposite. Modern corporate society has engineered this highly effective, beautifully disguised trap.
The golden handcuffs.
Exactly. We use these incredibly fat, comfortable paychecks, stock options, free gourmet cafeterias to just tame the most creative minds on the planet.
Wow.
We essentially pay them a premium to stay inside a prison. But what's really fascinating here is that this prison isn't made of iron bars or, non-compete clauses.
What is it made of?
It's constructed entirely out of thought walls. These are invisible, self-imposed limitations that completely dictate what is and isn't possible in their minds.
And tearing down those invisible thought walls is the exact mission of this deep dive today.
Absolutely.
So if you're listening to this right now, whether you're commuting to a job you feel stuck in or sitting at a desk wondering why your own projects are stalling, this conversation is literally tailored for you.
Yeah, we're getting into the heavy stuff today.
We really are. We're pulling from the life's work of Bernard Roth. He is a legendary engineering professor who has spent over 52 years at Stanford University, and he's one of the foundational architects of Stanford's world-renowned design school.
The D.school.
Like the D.school. But here is the massive twist, and this is such a great hook. Roth is a hardcore roboticist.
Yeah, which sounds so counterintuitive.
Totally. His background is in kinematics, which is like the geometry of motion.
Yeah.
Yet the material we are diving into today isn't about engineering machines at all.
No, it's entirely about engineering your life.
Exactly. And why is a roboticist so good at teaching life design?
Well, it's because his approach is just devastatingly effective. When a roboticist looks at human behavior, they don't use, fluffy self-help platitudes.
Right. They aren't going to tell you to just manifest.
Exactly. They look for the mechanism. They look for the actual code that is causing the glitch. So in this deep dive, we're going to strip away the academic jargon. We're looking at the cold, hard, neurological realities of how our minds operate.
Which is going to be a bit of a slap in the face for some people.
Oh, a massive slap in the
Right.
face. We're going to examine the specific ways our brains actively lie to us, why the elaborate reasons we use to justify our inaction are actually just garbage excuses.
Garbage excuses, yeah.
And most importantly, we're going to unpack the extreme, really counterintuitive tools you can use right now to instantly unlock your potential.
So, to you listening, prepare yourself. Because by the end of this deep dive, you're going to realize that you are the warden of your own prison. And the door to your cell has been wide open this entire time.
Such a powerful realization.
Okay, let's unpack this first concept. We have this kinematic engineer teaching what essentially amounts to a class on human potential. On paper, it sounds like a mismatch, right?
Sure, it did.
But his core premise is that human limits are almost never technical. Like, we aren't held back by a lack of resources or a lack of know-how. We are held back by our mental framing.
Yeah, the framing is everything.
And the first massive load-bearing thought wall we have to demolish is our deep-seated belief in our own rationality.
Oh, man, this is the part that really hurts the human ego.
It really does. Because if you ask anyone on the street how they make a decision, they'll give you the exact same sequence.
Right, they'll say, I weigh my options, I make a conscious, logical choice in my mind, and then I instruct my body to execute that choice.
We firmly believe we are the rational captains of our own ships.
We do. But if we look at the clinical testing mentioned in the research, specifically neuroimaging and fMRI brain scans, That sequence is proven to be a total neurological fabrication.
Which is wild.
You are quite literally lying to yourself about how you make choices.
Okay, I really want to drill down into the mechanics of this because it sounds like science fiction. How exactly does an MRI machine prove that our rationality is a lie? Like, what are they actually seeing on the screen?
So, to understand the mechanism, you have to look at the timeline of a thought.
Okay.
When researchers place a subject in an fMRI machine and ask them to perform a spontaneous physical action like pressing a button or just flexing a wrist.
Nothing simple.
Exactly. They map the electrical activity in the brain. If rationality were true, the conscious part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, would light up first, followed by the motor cortex, which moves the muscle.
Right, that makes logical sense. Think first, then act.
But the scans show the exact opposite.
Wait, really?
Yes. The motor signals initiate the physical action fractions of a second, sometimes full seconds, before your conscious mind even registers the thought to take the action.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. My brain is sending the signal to move my hand before I, like the conscious voice in my head, even decides to move my hand.
Precisely. Your subconscious habit pathways and instincts initiate the action first.
That is deeply unsettling.
It is. Your conscious brain isn't the CEO making the executive decisions, it's the PR agent.
Oh, I love that. The PR agent.
It's a retrospective storyteller. Once the action has already begun, the conscious brain scrambles to invent a logical reason for why you do it, so you don't feel like a biological automaton.
So rationality is just the incredibly convincing story we tell ourselves after the fact to maintain the illusion of control.
Exactly. Most of what we do is purely habit, but we dress it up in the tuxedo of rational choice.
That perfectly explains this wild exercise Roth conducts with his Stanford students. It's one of my favorite anecdotes from the material, and it's super anti-consensus.
The water bottle exercise.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
pure theater. Roth asks for a strong, young student to volunteer to come to the front of the lecture hall.
Right.
The professor holds out a plastic water bottle and gives the student a very specific verbal instruction. He says, "Please try to take it away from me."
And the physical response to that specific phrasing is always just fascinating to watch.
It is. The student grabs the bottle and tugs. At first, they're gentle because, it's a respected older professor.
Right, they don't want to hurt him.
But then they realize the professor has an absolute iron grip on this plastic bottle. So the young student pulls harder.
They really get into it.
Yeah, they twist, they wrestle, they struggle, their face gets red, but they cannot pry it out of his hand.
Because the professor is anchored.
Exactly. After a minute of this awkward wrestling match, the professor stops them. He resets the scenario, but this time he changes the psychological framing.
He changes the words.
Right. He tells the student to imagine they are dealing with an annoying sibling. The situation is completely unacceptable, and it's time to reclaim the bottle. The new instruction isn't try to take it. It's simply take it.
And that subtle linguistic shift completely bypasses the PR agent in the brain.
It's like flipping a light switch. The student just effortlessly whisks the bottle out of the professor's hand before the older man can even tense his muscles to react.
It's instant.
They use significantly less physical exertion, but they succeed instantly. Okay, let's unpack this. Are you saying the act of trying is actually just a socially acceptable form of quitting?
If we look at the underlying psychology, absolutely.
Wow.
Trying is entirely about applying brute force because the concept of trying inherently includes a built-in escape hatch for failure.
Explain that a bit more.
When your brain receives the command to try, it literally divides its resources. Half of your mental energy goes into the physical action, but the other half is immediately hijacked by that PR agent.
Getting the story ready.
Exactly. It's preparing the spin for when you inevitably fail. It's drafting the press release. Well, I gave it a good shot. I tried my best, but the professor was too strong.
You're giving yourself a socially acceptable out.
Yes. You are permitting yourself to fail before you even start.
It makes me think of a tug of war. Imagine two people pulling a rope. One person looks like they are straining, sweating, and pulling with all their might, but secretly, they're wearing a safety harness bolted to the ground.
That's a brilliant analogy.
They have the appearance of effort, but they aren't actually committing their full weight to the fall. They are protected.
Right. When you try, you are wearing that safety harness. You are using force, which implies pushing against a resistance.
Force versus power, right?
Exactly. But doing, when the instruction change to take it, uses power. Power is the pure, unfiltered channeling of intention.
No safety harness.
Right. When you are just executing an action, you aren't wasting cognitive load worrying about the mechanics of failure. You aren't drafting excuses. You are simply collapsing the distance between intention and reality.
The distinction between force and power is just a massive paradigm shift. But it leads to a rather terrifying question. If our conscious brain is lying to us about the very origins of our physical actions, creating this comfortable illusion that we are trying when we are actually just stalling, what else is it lying to us about?
Oh, if we connect this to the bigger picture laid out in the research, the brain is lying to us about something much more fundamental.
Here we go.
It is actively deceiving us about the inherent meaning of literally everything we value in our lives.
And here is where the deep dive takes a sharp turn into the existential. The sources make a point that feels almost violently blunt when you first read it.
It does.
The assertion is this: everything you care about, your high-status job, your bank account, your vintage bicycle, even your partner, has absolutely zero inherent meaning.
Zero. None. In a purely objective, universe-level sense, those things are just collections of atoms.
Just atoms.
Right. They have no built-in preordained value.
Which sounds completely nihilistic and, honestly, terribly depressing on the surface. Like, if you tell someone their career is meaningless, they're going to get defensive.
Oh, they'll get incredibly angry.
Right. But the material describes a psychological exercise called My Daughter Has No Meaning that Stanford students undergo.
Which is a very intense exercise.
It is. They sit in a room. They are told to look at objects, think of people they love, think of their biggest achievements, and say out loud to the group, my job has no meaning, my shoes have no meaning, my daughter has no meaning.
And the immediate reaction in the room is usually complete pandemonium.
I can imagine.
People laugh nervously, some get visibly angry, others are deeply uncomfortable. But the pedagogical purpose of this exercise isn't to push people into nihilism.
Right. It's not about being depressed.
Not at all. It's actually grounded in a concept very close to cognitive behavioral therapy. The purpose is profound, overwhelming relief.
Relief from what? Exactly.
Relief from the crushing weight of external judgment.
Oh, that makes sense.
We suffer immensely as human beings because we falsely believe the universe assigns a fixed, unchangeable value to our successes and, more importantly, to our failures.
Like it's written in stone.
Exactly. We think a failed business means we are objectively a failure. But the universe doesn't care. The realization here is that we are the sole exclusive authors of meaning.
Nothing means anything until you decide what it means.
Spot on. If you fail a massive licensing exam and you assign that event the meaning of, I am fundamentally inadequate and my future is completely ruined, you will suffer a paralyzing depression.
Obviously.
But if you strip away that false inherent meaning, you realize you can assign it a new one.
Like what?
You can assign it the meaning of, I just discovered a highly ineffective way to study for this specific test.
That changes everything.
When you grasp that you hold the pen, you are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are the master of your reality.
That reframing of failure reminds me of the most cinematic story in the entire set of sources. It perfectly illustrates how we weaponize meaning against ourselves and others.
The story of Mike.
Yes, the slacker's redemption. It's so good. Mike was a graduate student who took this exact design class. His final project was supposed to be this incredibly complex fire-powered pipe organ.
A very ambitious project.
Super ambitious. But throughout the semester, Mike exhibited all the classic symptoms of self-sabotage. He procrastinated constantly. He was full of elaborate excuses. And when presentation day finally arrived, it was an absolute disaster.
It just didn't work.
Barely functioned at all. It was embarrassing for everyone. So the professor, reacting like any normal human, mentally slapped a massive permanent label on Mike's forehead. Slacker. Lost cause. Failure.
Which is a very natural yet highly destructive cognitive shortcut.
We do it all the time.
We take a localized temporary event, a bad presentation, and we extrapolate it to define the entirety of a human being's permanent character.
Exactly. We freeze them in carbonite based on one single data point.
We really do.
But fast forward 3 years. The professor is out in the Nevada desert at the Burning Man Festival.
Just wandering around.
Wandering the playa. And he comes across this mind-blowing art installation. It's called The Serpent Mother.
Oh, I've seen pictures of this. It's incredible.
Picture a 168-foot-long articulated metal snake powered by massive hydraulics with 41 individual flamethrowers shooting fire 20 feet into the night sky.
The engineering required for that is just staggering.
It really is. It's the absolute talk of the festival. So the professor walks up to examine the intricate mechanics of the hydraulic jaw, and he asks a crew member who designed this masterpiece.
And what do they say?
The crew member points to a guy sitting in the dust holding a complex remote control and says, "Talk to the guy holding the controller."
And we know exactly who is holding that controller.
It's Mike, the supposed slacker from 3 years ago. He masterminded the entire operation. He led a massive team of volunteers, designed the hydraulics, programmed the pyrotechnics.
This story beautifully exposes the sheer ignorance of our labeling system.
It completely destroys it.
Slapping a permanent label on a person based on a localized failure is just a failure of imagination on our part. Human beings are highly dynamic, constantly evolving systems.
We aren't static objects.
Right. When we label someone a failure or a slacker, we are taking a meaning we unilaterally invented in one specific context and pretending it is an objective law of physics.
And the real tragedy isn't just that we do this to other people. We do this to ourselves constantly.
Oh, constantly.
We walk around completely terrified of our own resumes. We carry this deep-seated, almost childhood fear of the permanent record.
Yes, the myth of the permanent record.
It's such a heavy weight.
It is. From the moment we enter elementary school, we are threatened with this mystical, omniscient ledger. We are told that our misdeeds, our bad grades, our moments of laziness go on a permanent record that will follow us to the grave, dictating our worth to future employers and society at large.
But the sources absolutely destroy this myth with another great story.
The physics professor.
Right. They detail the story of a brilliant professor who, back when he was a graduate student, actually received an F in a highly advanced physics class.
And for an academic, an F is the end of the world.
He was utterly devastated. He spent nights staring at the ceiling, convinced his career was over, his reputation ruined, his life entirely derailed by this one bad grade on his permanent record.
But here's the massive reality check the text provides.
Please drop the reality check.
50 years later, after an entire illustrious career of teaching, publishing, and innovating, not a single human being on Earth has ever asked or cared about that F.
Nobody cares.
It raises a fundamental question about the audience we perform for. Who is actually keeping score?
Who is keeping score?
We project this harsh, judgmental audience onto the world. We assume everyone is meticulously tracking our missteps. But the liberating reality is that everyone else is too busy worrying about their own imaginary permanent records to care about yours.
The only person keeping score is you. So if we are the only ones keeping score, and if we know deep down that these labels and permanent records are illusions we create, why do we invest so much energy into constantly inventing elaborate excuses? Like, why do we lie to justify our failures to other people?
Because, as the material bluntly states, reasons are just prettied up lies.
Prettied up lies.
Lies.
That is the next major slap in the face for our egos.
It really is.
Okay, let's explore that. Think about the most classic excuse in the corporate world. You show up 20 minutes late to a crucial board meeting. You rush through the door, sweating out of breath, and you immediately say, "I am so incredibly sorry. The traffic on the bridge was an absolute nightmare. There was a multi-car pileup. I couldn't move for half an hour."
We've all done it.
What's the raw, uncomfortable truth behind that statement? The traffic wasn't the actual reason you were late. The truth is that the priority of that meeting was simply zero.
It's a harsh, almost combative way to look at our own behavior, but it's fundamentally neurologically true.
Prove it. How do we test it?
To test the validity of a reason, you just have to raise the stakes.
Okay.
If the penalty for being late to that exact meeting wasn't just an annoyed boss, but actual literal execution, like if you would be put to death for walking in at 9:01 a.m., what would your behavior have been?
Oh, it wouldn't even be a question. I would have driven there the night before, set up a camping tent on the sidewalk outside the building, and slept against the front door.
Yeah.
Traffic wouldn't have even been a factor.
Exactly. The external obstacle, the traffic remained the same in both scenarios. What changed was your internal level of commitment.
Wow.
Therefore, the traffic was never the cause of your lateness. Your lack of priority was.
But society loves reasons, doesn't it?
Society thrives on them. We trade them like currency because they make us look reasonable.
Right. If you walk up and punch a stranger in the face for absolutely no reason, society locks you away as a dangerous sociopath.
But if you punch someone in the face and say, "He insulted my family and reminded me of an abusive figure from my past," suddenly society pauses and says, "Well, we don't condone violence, but we understand."
Right. We give it a pass.
Reasons are a psychological bribe we pay to society to avoid accountability. But the fatal flaw is that by believing our own reasons, we block ourselves from ever fixing our dysfunctional behavior.
You can't fix your time management issue if you genuinely believe the city's infrastructure is to blame.
Exactly. You outsource the blame, so you never fix the problem.
That perfectly sets up this amazing cultural rule they instituted at Stanford's design group. It's brilliant in its simplicity.
I love this rule.
When a student or faculty member is explaining why a project failed, and they start a sentence with the phrase, "The reason I couldn't get the prototype done is," the entire room is trained to loudly and sarcastically chorus back at them. That's a good reason.
It's an incredible pattern interrupt.
It totally strips the power and the dignity away from the excuse. It stops the speaker dead in their tracks and forces them to realize, oh, right, I'm just telling a fictional story right now to protect my ego.
It forces radical ownership. By mocking the concept of the reason, they are breaking the causal fallacy that our brains naturally fall into.
The causal fallacy.
Right. Just because two things happen at the same time, like traffic existing and you being late, doesn't mean one causally forced the other.
There's a great joke from the text that illustrates this causal fallacy perfectly.
Oh, the Times Square joke.
Yes. A man is standing right in the middle of Times Square, just aggressively snapping his fingers. Snap, 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 nonstop.
Okay.
A woman walks up to him, totally bewildered, and asks, "Excuse me, why are you snapping your fingers like that?" He doesn't miss a beat and says, "To keep the tigers away."
Oh, classic.
She looks around at the skyscrapers and says, "But there are no tigers for thousands of miles." And the man just smiles smugly and says, "Pretty effective, isn't it?"
It's an absurd joke, but it is a perfect mirror for human psychology. We constantly link correlation to causation to protect our egos from the vulnerability of choice.
Because choice is terrifying.
It is. We are utterly terrified of just looking someone in the eye and saying, I chose not to prioritize your project. So we invent tigers.
And this self-deception goes even deeper, taking on a much darker tone when we look at how we judge the people around us. Let's unpack the concept of psychological projection, or what you might call the mirror of hate.
This one is going to sting for a lot of people listening.
It is. The premise is this. If you intensely, viscerally hate a specific personality trait in someone else, it almost always means you possess that exact same trait yourself, and you are desperately subconsciously trying to hide it.
It is one of the most classic, robust defense mechanisms identified in psychoanalysis, tracing back to Freud and Jung.
Right.
The human ego is fragile. It cannot tolerate seeing its own deep-seated flaws or hypocrisies. So when a person harbors a trait they subconsciously despise, say a tendency to be controlling or deeply insecure, their brain refuses to acknowledge it internally.
So what does it do?
Instead, when they spot that exact same trait in someone else, the subconscious seizes the opportunity to attack the flaw externally.
The author talks about this in a very vulnerable way. He describes how he would get incredibly irrationally angry watching his young son bicker over petty things with a friend.
Just super triggered by it.
His blood would just boil. He felt entirely justified in his anger, thinking he was just being a good parent correcting bad behavior. But then he had this moment of painful, quiet self-awareness where the illusion shattered.
He realized the truth.
He realized, I don't hate this because it's bad parenting. I hate watching him bicker because I constantly bicker with my wife over petty things, and I loathe that part of myself.
It's a profound realization. We project our self-hatred onto others to avoid the pain of self-correction.
Wow.
When we criticize loudly and emotionally, we are usually confessing our own hidden sins. It's a great heuristic for life.
Love.
If you want to know what someone secretly struggles with the most, don't listen to what they brag about.
What should you listen to?
Listen to the specific insults they constantly hurl at other people.
That is so incredibly true. And the sources actually apply this concept of projection to something huge. Marriage. This was fascinating in the material.
The comparison between Western love marriages and traditional arranged marriages.
Yes. Why is the divorce rate for modern, free-choice romantic marriages hovering around 50%, while traditional arranged marriages in places like India often report much lower divorce rates and sometimes even deeper, longer-lasting affection over time?
It completely defies the Western romantic ideal.
It's super anti-consensus. But the explanation is purely about projection.
Exactly. In a Western love marriage, the initial courtship is heavily fueled by projection. You aren't falling in love with the actual flawed human being in front of you.
Who are you falling in love with?
You are falling in love with projected ideal. You are taking all your unmet needs, your fantasies, and projecting them onto this person.
But that illusion can't last, right?
No, it inevitably shatters. As you live together, reality grinds away the projection. The partner fails to live up to the impossible ideal you invented, and disillusionment sets in.
Which leads to divorce. But in the arranged marriage model, discussed in the sources.
Right. In that model, the couple enters the marriage with virtually zero romantic projection. They know it's a practical arrangement.
The expectations are baseline reality.
Exactly. There's no perfect illusion to shatter. Because they start at reality, they can actually build genuine affection and partnership based on shared struggles and mutual support, rather than constantly mourning the death of a fantasy.
It's all about dropping the illusions. Okay, let's take a breath and look at the landscape we've just painted.
It's a bit bleak so far.
It is. Our brains invent completely fictional reasons to justify our inaction. They project our worst flaws onto our coworkers and spouses. They literally lie to us about the motor commands of our own bodies.
The PR agent is working overtime.
Seriously. With a cognitive machine this deeply deceptive and flawed, it is an absolute miracle we ever managed to make major life decisions.
And actually, as the material points out, our standard decision-making process is completely broken too. We constantly fall into what they call the life's journey trap.
And the burden's ass paradox.
Oh, yes.
Before we get to the life's journey, explain burden's ass because it perfectly illustrates this trap.
So, burden's ass is a philosophical paradox about a perfectly rational donkey. This donkey is placed exactly halfway between two equally sized, equally delicious piles of hay.
Okay, so it has a choice to make.
But because the donkey is perfectly rational and the piles are completely identical in value and distance, it cannot find a logical reason to choose one over the other.
So what happens?
It overthinks it, paralyzes itself, and literally starves to death in the middle of a field of food.
Which sounds ridiculous for a donkey, but human beings do this constantly.
We do. We culturally worship the pros and cons list. We genuinely believe that if we just overthink a decision long enough, if we gather enough data points and build a complex enough mental spreadsheet, we can accurately predict the future.
And ensure a safe outcome.
Right, but it is a total statistical illusion.
I love the visceral image the source uses for this paralysis. Picture thousands of caterpillars in the searing heat of Death Valley.
Oh, the caterpillar death march.
Yes. They are relentlessly crawling across a boiling hot asphalt road. They are getting crushed by the hundreds under the tires of passing cars. It's a massacre.
And why are they taking this massive risk?
Just to reach a patch of desert scrub on the other side of the highway that looks exactly like the patch they just abandoned.
It's tragic.
It is change purely for the sake of change, so driven by a blind biological instinct that the grass must be greener. And we do this exact same thing with our lives.
We agonize over crossing the road.
We take the new corporate job. We uproot our families to move to a new city. We blow up our relationships thinking we've calculated a better future. But we often just end up in the exact same emotional dirt, having gotten completely flattened by stress in the process.
It happens because we obsess over the wrong variables. We fall victim to the arrival fallacy, the belief that once we reach a specific destination, all our internal problems will vanish.
So how do we stop starving between the haystacks?
To combat this, the professor uses a fascinating method with his Stanford students. When they come to his office agonizing over major life choices like whether to commit 5 years to a PhD program, he calls it the life's journey method. He sits the anxious student down and walks them through the timeline of their perfect rational choice. He says, okay, you suffer for 5 years and get the PhD, then what?
And the student says?
The student says, well, then I get a prestigious job as a professor. And Roth says, okay, then what? Then I buy a nice house in the suburbs, I get married, I have kids. Then what? My kids grow up, I retire, I get old.
Then what?
I die.
Wow. That escalates quickly. It's a bit dark, isn't it?
It is incredibly stark, but the psychological impact is deeply liberating.
How so?
Because if the professor then asks the student to map out the other path, say they skip the PhD, go straight into a risky startup, the timeline ends the exact same way.
They both end in death.
Both choices, no matter how much you optimize them, end in death. The reality we refuse to accept is that the variables in life are infinitely complex.
You can't spreadsheet life.
No pros and cons list can account for a chance meeting at a coffee shop that leads to a marriage, or a global economic crash, or a sudden random illness. Attempting to calculate the perfect, frictionless endgame is a fool's errand that only leads to paralysis.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I would push back here a little.
Yeah.
If rationality is largely a post hoc lie, and if predicting the future is mathematically impossible, what are we supposed to do?
Give up.
Should we just throw our hands up, abandon all planning, and flip a coin for our major life choices?
Not at all. It doesn't mean you abandon thought. It means you abandon the illusion that a single mathematically perfect choice exists waiting to be discovered.
So you have to shift your methodology.
Right. Instead of biasing yourself toward analysis, you must bias yourself toward action. The design thinking model teaches that intuition, when driven by rapid, small-scale physical action, is often much more honest and effective than a prejudiced, overanalyzed spreadsheet.
Don't be afraid to make a choice and fail.
Because in this framework, failure isn't the opposite of success. It is simply a data point on the iterative path to success.
And there's a brilliant tactical tool from the material, which I believe is an adaptation of a classic decision-making heuristic that forces this kind of intuitive action.
The finger gun test.
The 15-second finger gun test. If you are agonizing over a major choice, say, between two job offers and you've been staring at a pros and cons list for 3 weeks, here's what you do.
You find a trusted friend.
Have them point their fingers at your head like a gun and say, you have exactly 15 seconds to choose, or I pull the trigger, 14, 13, 12.
And what happens is the artificial time constraint completely overloads that calculating, lying PR agent in your brain.
It doesn't have time to draft a press release.
Exactly. Your subconscious, which usually already knows the answer, instantly screams out the true choice.
It bypasses the analytical paralysis and taps directly into your underlying intention.
Which perfectly sets up the next massive realization.
Right. If overthinking doesn't solve our problems, and if we need to bias toward action, what actions should we be taking?
The slap-in-the-face answer from the D.school is this. 99% of the time you are completely stuck on a problem, it is because you are trying to solve the completely wrong problem.
This brings us to the concept of reframing.
It is the absolute beating heart of design thinking.
Let me give you 2 incredible, world-changing stories from the sources that illustrate the power of reframing. First, we have a group of brilliant Stanford engineering students who travel to Myanmar.
Okay.
Their academic mission, solve an agricultural irrigation problem for impoverished farmers. They get there, they survey the fields, they look at the water tables, and they fail.
Just completely strike out.
They completely failed to fix the irrigation system in any meaningful way. But because they were trained in design thinking, their eyes were open to the entire human environment, not just their narrowly assigned technical task.
They weren't just looking at the pipes.
Exactly. While spending time in the farmers' huts, they noticed something horrifying. These families had no electricity. After sundown, they were relying on toxic, open-flame kerosene lamps and candles inside these tiny, poorly ventilated homes.
The health implications of that are catastrophic. Breathing that kerosene smoke every night is the equivalent of smoking multiple packs of cigarettes a day, especially for children.
Not only was it destroying their lungs and creating massive fire hazards, but the kerosene was so expensive it was consuming upwards of 25% of these impoverished families' entire income.
A quarter of their income just for light.
So the students engaged in radical reframing. They realized the actual problem wasn't getting water to the crops. The deeper, more urgent problem was the quality of life, the health crisis, and the economic drain occurring inside the home.
So what did they do?
They abandoned the irrigation project entirely. They pivoted and utilized their engineering skills to design ultra-low-cost, durable solar lighting solutions.
Wow.
That pivot eventually grew into an enterprise that sold over 2 million solar lamps across 42 countries, fundamentally altering the economic and health trajectories of countless communities.
And this isn't an isolated incident either. A similar group went to Nepal to repair broken infant incubators in rural hospitals.
Right.
But upon arrival, they reframed the problem. They realized the issue wasn't the broken machines. The issue was that mothers in remote, mountainous villages couldn't physically transport their premature babies to the hospitals before it was too late.
So fixing the heavy hospital machine doesn't actually solve the problem.
Exactly. So instead of fixing a heavy machine, they invented the Embrace Infant Warmer, a low-cost, portable, phase-change sleeping bag that didn't require electricity. It saved hundreds of thousands of lives.
They stopped trying to fix the machine and focused on the real goal, keeping the babies warm. But my absolute favorite example of this, and maybe one of the greatest design stories ever told, is the pirate ship MRI.
Ah, the Doug Dietz story. It's a masterclass in empathy and reframing.
It's so good. Doug Deese was an industrial designer working for GE Healthcare. He spends years designing this hyper-advanced, sleek, state-of-the-art MRI scanner. It wins design awards.
It's a technological marvel.
He goes to a hospital to see his masterpiece installed and in action, feeling like he's at the pinnacle of his career. But while he's standing in the hallway, he sees a little girl walking toward the scanning room, and she is crying in absolute sheer terror.
Heartbreaking.
Doug asks the technician what's going on, and the technician hits him with a devastating statistic. Upwards of 85% of young children have to be heavily sedated, literally put unconscious with powerful drugs just to endure the scan.
Because the machine is terrifying.
It's a massive claustrophobic tube that sounds like a jackhammer. Doug was absolutely crushed. He realized he had designed a technological marvel that was emotionally torturing children.
So how do you solve a problem of that magnitude?
Right. The traditional rational engineering mind looks at that and says, the problem is the machine is too loud and scary. We need to redesign the machine.
We need to invent quieter magnets, change the bore size, alter the physics of the scanner.
But that solution would cost tens of millions of dollars, take 5 years of R&D, and require recertifying the medical device with the FDA.
So what was the actual solution?
Doug didn't touch a single wire. He didn't alter the magnets. He didn't change the objective reality of the machine at all.
He changed the subjective experience.
He reframed the problem. The goal wasn't how do we fix the machine. The goal was how do we fix the child's fear.
Right.
Doug teamed up with experts from local children's museums. They completely redesigned the room. They painted the floor to look like water. They wrapped the machine in decals to look like a pirate ship.
That's brilliant.
And most importantly, they changed the script for the operators. When a child walked in, the technician would say, okay, we are going on an adventure. You're going to climb inside the pirate ship, and when it gets really loud, that means the pirate captain is looking for you. You have to hold perfectly, completely still so the pirates don't find you.
And the results were nothing short of miraculous, right?
Yeah, the sedation rates dropped from 85% to near zero. Children were actually asking their parents if they could come back and play in the pirate ship again.
It's unbelievable. It is the perfect analogy for how we live our lives. We spend years banging our heads against a brick wall, trying to break through it with brute force, getting concussed and exhausted, when there is a perfectly good, open door standing 3 feet to our left.
We get obsessively attached to the obstacle, rather than looking at the underlying goal.
The diagnostic question you must always ask yourself when you feel completely stuck is this: what would it do for me if I solved this problem?
Give me an example of that.
The source material gives a brilliantly simple, everyday example of this. Imagine a college student who is exhausted and failing his classes because his bed frame is broken and his mattress sags to the floor.
Okay.
He spends 3 weeks obsessed with fixing the bed. He's researching the exact right tensile strength of wire, looking for specialized springs, trying to borrow power tools. He is totally stuck on the problem of fixing the bed.
But if the professor asks him,
what would it do for you if you fixed the bed? The student answers, I would get a good night's sleep.
the reframed realization hits instantly.
The problem isn't the bed frame. The problem is getting sleep.
So what's the solution?
He just walked down the street and bought a cheap new bed. Problem solved in 20 minutes instead of 3 weeks.
Stop hitting the lamppost. Walk around it.
Exactly.
But this requires a profound shift in how our brains operate. We've talked about all these massive mental traps, the lies of the MRI, the projection, the caterpillars, but how do we practically, tactically escape the cage on a Tuesday morning at the office?
The sources outline a methodology created by a man named Rolf Fast, who laid out 22 specific tools to get unstuck.
22 tools to escape the cage.
Yes, tools like brainstorming or synectics, which is the practice of making the strange familiar and the familiar strange to spark creativity. Or forced transformations, where you force two completely unrelated concepts together to generate a new idea.
Storyboarding, mind mapping, all of that.
Right, or deliberately dropping abstraction levels, zooming out from a micro problem to see the macro system.
But before you even get to those complex frameworks, the most immediate, powerful, and accessible tool you have to reprogram your brain is the language you use every single day.
Language isn't just a passive descriptor of our reality, it is the source code that dictates it.
Okay, if you are listening right now, here's a linguistic magic trick you can implement the second this deep dive ends.
I love this one.
Take the word but out of your vocabulary and replace it with the word and.
It sounds almost childishly simple, almost like a corporate retreat icebreaker, but the neurological impact on how your brain processes conflict is profound.
Let's run a simulation. Say you are feeling overwhelmed, and you tell yourself out loud, I really want to go back to school to get my master's degree, but I have absolutely no free time.
What does your brain actually hear when you use the word but?
It hears an impossible, mutually exclusive paradox.
It hears, these two forces are in direct opposition, one must destroy the other, so game over, don't even try.
It provides your PR agent with the perfect, socially acceptable excuse to quit.
Now just change one word. I really want to get my master's degree and I have absolutely no free time.
The shift in cognitive processing is immediate.
When you use and, you force the brain out of its binary excuse-making mode. You force it to hold two conflicting, difficult truths simultaneously without shutting down.
You are sending an executive command to your subconscious. Both of these statements are objective reality. Now solve the puzzle of how they coexist.
It completely transforms a dead-end wall into a design challenge.
It's incredible. And there's another massive vocabulary shift. Replace the phrase I have to with I want to.
This one is tough for people.
It is. We all walk around suffering from this chronic victim mentality regarding our own schedules. I have to go to this boring meeting. I have to pick up the dry cleaning. I have to commute in traffic.
The instruction is to simply say, I want to go to this meeting.
Okay, I have to push back hard on this one. What if I objectively, deeply do not want to go to that meeting? What if the meeting is soul-crushing? What if I say, I have to breathe? I don't want to breathe. My autonomic nervous system forces me to. I have to.
No, you don't. You want to breathe because your higher order goal is that you want to stay alive. If you truly, deeply did not want to stay alive, you have the tragic agency to stop breathing. The point the material is making is that literally everything in your adult life is a choice.
So I don't have to go to the meeting.
You don't have to go to that soul-crushing meeting. You want to go to that meeting because you want to keep your job, because you want the paycheck, because you want to pay your mortgage, because you want the security of a roof over your family's head.
That makes sense.
By saying, I have to, you are pretending you are a helpless slave to external forces. By acknowledging I want to, you reconnect with your underlying motivations. You reclaim your agency.
It strips away the victim complex and forces radical ownership of your reality. And what's fascinating is that it's not just the words coming out of our mouths that trap us, it is the physical space our bodies occupy.
Wow, the psychology of space.
The sources dive deeply into how physical environments dictate human energy and hierarchy. We constantly ignore this in the corporate world, but our physical bodies and our spatial relationships to others are intimately connected to our cognitive and emotional states.
There is a brilliant story about a yellow caution tape that perfectly illustrates this.
Yes. Imagine a university professor who is assigned to teach a class in this massive, cavernous, 400-seat amphitheater lecture hall. But only 90 students are enrolled.
A recipe for disaster.
Human nature dictates that all 90 students scatter themselves across the very back rows, hiding in the shadows, trying to remain invisible.
Right, they want to be as far away from the teacher as possible.
The professor spends the first 2 weeks completely exhausting himself, shouting into the void, trying to project energy across 30 rows of empty chairs to reach these disengaged students.
Yeah.
The energy of the room is totally dead.
So using design thinking, what does he do?
He doesn't yell at them. He doesn't give a speech about participation. He goes to a hardware store, buys a massive roll of bright yellow construction caution tape, and physically tapes off the entire back 2/3 of the auditorium.
He literally barricades the empty seats.
When the students arrive, they are physically forced to cluster together in the first few rows, sitting shoulder to shoulder right in front of the professor.
And the result? The energy of the room transforms instantaneously.
The professor goes from being drained to being energized.
The students, physically closer to the source of information and to each other, are suddenly highly engaged. The physical space dictated the emotional reality.
Yes. Or think about the classic corporate boardroom. If you have a long rectangular mahogany table, you have instantly established a rigid medieval hierarchy.
You have a boss at the head of the table holding court, and everyone else ranked by proximity.
But the D.school principles suggest moving all the chairs into a flat, equal circle with no table at all. The entire power dynamic of the group shatters and rebuilds as a collaborative unit.
The sources even talk about the micro movements of space. If someone in a meeting is being quiet and withdrawn, simply pushing their chair a few inches physically closer to the center of the group literally forces their nervous system into a state of emotional participation.
Because controlling your physical environment is controlling your cognitive reality. This ties into a much larger philosophy about organizational structure.
It's why the Stanford D.school operates with a remarkably flat hierarchy. For decades, they actively resisted appointing a traditional department chair.
A completely flat organization.
Instead, they used a flat, circular organizational model where leadership rotated and decisions were made in one-hour weekly meetings requiring unanimous consent.
Which sounds like a recipe for chaos, but it actually prevented the bureaucratic bottlenecks and empire building that destroy so many brilliant companies.
But to operate in that kind of flat, vulnerable space, you have to drop the act. You have to escape the psychological cage.
We are exactly like number 6 in that bizarre, surreal 1960s British TV show, The Prisoner.
That is the perfect metaphor for everything we've discussed today.
For those who haven't seen it, the main character, known only as number 6, is trapped in this weird, Kafkaesque coastal village.
He's a prisoner.
He spends the entire series fighting a shadow war to escape, constantly screaming at his unseen captors, demanding to know who is keeping me here, who is the leader, who is number 1.
And in the surreal, mind-bending final episode, he finally gets his answer.
He pulls off the mask of number 1, and the face underneath is his own.
The answer to who is number 1 is you are number 6.
He had imprisoned himself.
We build our own prisons out of our fear of failure, our projection, our excuses, and our reliance on false rationality. The bars of the cage are literally yards apart. You can walk out into freedom anytime you choose.
But walking out is terrifying because it requires dropping the armor. It requires dropping what psychologists call pseudo-mutuality.
Pseudo-mutuality. This is a critical concept.
Explain that, because it's so rampant in business.
It describes a dynamic often found in dysfunctional families, but incredibly common in corporate environments where everyone maintains a superficial, fake facade of harmony and teamwork.
It's that toxic networking culture.
Exactly. Everyone is smiling, handing out business cards and saying, we're a family, while secretly maneuvering, harboring resentments, and backstabbing each other.
It is an exhausting performance that drains all creative energy. The material talks about David Kelly, the founder of IDEO, and his 40-year partnership.
Right. David Kelly completely rejected that networking model.
The sources argue that true freedom, the kind of freedom that allows you to build a 168-foot fire-breathing snake or revolutionize a medical device, requires abandoning pseudo-mutuality. It requires radical, sincere, authentic collaboration based on actual truth, not utility.
Which perfectly transitions us to the final and undoubtedly most sobering part of this entire deep dive.
The ultimate deadline.
Yes. We spend our entire adult lives agonizing over these concepts. We try to optimize our careers, we battle our egos, we play corporate politics, we worry about our permanent records.
We try to climb ladders that we haven't even verified or leaning against the right wall.
But in doing so, we become completely willfully blind to the one absolute, undeniable certainty waiting for every single one of us at the end of the road.
The ultimate non-negotiable deadline. Death.
The text provides a chilling juxtaposition of two vastly different ways to approach this ultimate deadline, and how our awareness of it should completely frame our daily struggles.
The first story is horrifying. It's the story of an incredibly gifted math genius.
A true tragedy.
This was a young man whose raw intellect was staggering, but he was deeply trapped in his own thought walls. He became obsessively, psychopathically fixated on his narrow academic achievements.
He couldn't see the forest for the trees.
He developed a rigid narrative about what he was owed by the university system based on his perceived brilliance. When a minor academic dispute didn't go his way, when the system didn't validate his ego, he completely snapped.
He took a hammer and brutally murdered his professor.
And the most chilling part, during the ensuing trial, he showed absolutely zero remorse. He remained completely cold, actively claiming that his actions were entirely logical and morally justified within his twisted framework of academic fairness.
It is the ultimate tragic extreme of everything we've discussed. He allowed a highly localized dispute, a minor comma in the long sentence of his life, to become his entire universe.
His PR agent brain convinced him that murder was a rational solution to an ego injury.
He was so obsessed with the micro-narrative of his own importance that he destroyed multiple lives.
Now, I want you to contrast that dark obsession with the story of Rolf Fast,
the creator of the 22 tools.
Exactly. Rolf was the brilliant professor's close friend, the colleague who actually created those tools for getting unstuck that we mentioned earlier. He was a master of design thinking.
Tragically, Rolf was diagnosed with advanced terminal stomach cancer.
Now, the traditional Western societal reaction to a terminal diagnosis is sheer panic. It's a desperate, frantic fight, often allowing the medical-industrial complex to dictate your final days.
Hooking you up to machines in a sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital room in a futile bid to extend biological existence by a few agonizing weeks.
But Rolf applied his life's work to his own mortality. He didn't panic.
No, he completely bypassed the cultural script.
He went to consult with his Zen master. He looked at his impending death not as an outrage, but as the final design constraint.
He deliberately chose to live out his final days on his own joyful, intentional terms.
He focused entirely on his spiritual well-being, his connections with loved ones, and his internal peace, rather than biological survival at any cost.
Rolf understood the difference between the comma and the period.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
When you truly realize deep in your bones that the period at the end of the sentence is rapidly approaching, the way you read the rest of the story changes fundamentally.
You stop playing the toxic, exhausting game of right and wrong.
You stop chasing hollow, externally validated achievements just to impress people you don't even genuinely like.
You realize that the failing grade, the traffic jam, the awkward presentation, they are just commas. And we spend our lives obsessing over the commas, entirely blind to the period.
Really do.
So for you listening right now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to carry with you today.
A final slap in the face.
Exactly. We've spent this time talking about tearing down thought walls, recognizing the lies of rationality, identifying your bullshit reasons, and realizing that the permanent record is a ghost story for adults. But I want you to imagine, right now, that a doctor looked you in the eye and told you that you only have 10 years left to live.
Or, shrink it further, what if you only have the rest of today?
Think about the specific anxieties that kept you awake last night. The resume gaps, the petty argument with a coworker over a Slack message, the desperate burning need to prove a stranger on the internet wrong.
The fear of starting that new project because it might look messy at first.
If the period was placed at the end of your sentence today, how many of those agonizing problems would instantly evaporate into total meaninglessness?
Almost all of them.
Are they even problems at all, or just illusions you've designed to keep yourself busy in your comfortable cell? Is our modern world, with all its metrics, its status games, its cubicle farms, and its constant vibrating anxiety, just a macro version of that math genius?
Are we all just furiously obsessing over the comma, completely missing the entire point of the sentence?
The cage door is wide open.
The guards went home a long time ago. You just have to decide to walk through it.
The power to fundamentally redesign your reality isn't hidden out there in the world. It isn't locked behind a paywall or a promotion. It is literally just a thought away. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.